Hello and welcome. My name's Catherine. I'm joined with Sofia Olins. Sofia Olins is a producer and director within the film industry, and you've also worked on TV as well. Sophia has directed and produced the documentary Lost in Vagueness, which was shown at Westlands a couple of years ago. And that was shot in Glastonbury, and it follows the foundation of the Lost Vagueness Fields, which have now become known as the Shangri-La Fields, I believe. And you've also been assistant director on the Peep show and the IT Crowd. So Sophia, if you don't mind, I will kickstart with my first question, which is, what inspired you to take up a career in film?
Okay, well, first of all, hi and hello, whoever's out there. Thanks for joining. I think what I think is that the basis for many people is stories and people, and connecting to each other has always been a huge inspiration for me. So since I was a child, always wanting to make up narratives and put ideas and people together. And I'm quite drawn to people in the shadows, I suppose, people who, unless we spend lots of time with, we can't see what it is that they do and understand their world. So I think that's been a huge inspiration for me. And also music. I love music, and I think it's such an important visual storytelling tool, isn't it? So many people, maybe lots of young people who are on this call, are also, there's a big sort of musical explosion now that's happening. I think it's really exciting.
Oh. Yeah, and so my second question is, what has been the key to your success as a producer and director?
Yeah, I was thinking about this when you were sort of mentioning this question. I think it depends on what success means for you, doesn't it? To me, it's really about, in this industry, it's really about, your resilience and your desire to keep going, and your energy to keep going, and to pursue, like the way that so many of us do in this business, to pursue the story, to pursue the money, to make the story, to pursue the audience to come and watch it. It is a huge test of endurance. I don't want to make that sound negative, but that is the reality of it. And so I think for me, success, maybe not necessarily my own or whoever's, but it is about being willing to keep chasing that dream, to hustle. So I think that's been one of the things, that having an understanding of that reality really is good for any industry, isn't it? Not just, the film industry. It's good for life.
A good life tip.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, like you say, passion and being hardworking, and perseverance as well being the key to your success.
Oh God, I mean, you just there isn't really anyone I know in the film industry that's just been handed it on a plate, and if they have been, they're usually not around for too long. I think because there's just the amount of rejections and having to be generous and gracious when you don't feel like being like that. It's a good lesson. I always talk, because I think I've mentioned to you, as I teach, I always mention to students that being willing to smile in the face of adversity is an important key lesson.
Yeah, that's good tip. So this relates in some respect, I'd like to talk about some of the challenge that you yourself and also the industry is facing during the COVID pandemic.
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone's got such different experiences, because it all depends what you do in the industry, and there's so many different elements in the industry, aren't there? I think for writers, it's been okay. It's not, it's not being, they're quite used to that kind of solitary existence. However, for actors, it's been hugely affecting. I've got a lot of actor friends and, cinematographer friends who have really had to think as to how to be creative in this time. And actually, I'm sure you'll agree, you know, it's been really incredible, the level of creativity that's come out. You know, I know that it's all been kind of outside the industry as such, but the work that I've seen, I've loved. And so, yes, of course, we all know it's going to affect us forever, really, because it's going to affect the way we do production from here on out. But also, you know, perhaps the stories that are going to come out of it are going to be giving us new insights. I mean, I'm just thinking about Unprecedented on iPlayer.
Yeah.
That was brilliant. You know, that was all the I think it was Brian Century Films. And it was just all stories through Zoom, really, and the actors were recording it themselves, and you know, and it was just done really in a really basic way, but it worked, and the post-production was more or less how it would have been. I think for a lot of post-production houses, you know, there may be some kind of I'm trying to think of words that aren't a pun, because I keep saying cuts and edits in my head. I'm not trying to do that. But yeah, there are going to be some cuts to personnel for sure, because it's so difficult to sustain that amount of people, especially when so many people can work remotely. But you know, I don't want to guess the future. Who knows what it's going to bring. Either way, I think some great work's come out of it, of a very, very sad and awful situation. But it's always good for artists, filmmakers, storytellers, etc., to reflect on a time. I think that's the best you can do, isn't it?
Absolutely. And I'd say that, you know, the amount of online content being produced by professionals, and like you say, Unprecedented on the BBC iPlayer, there's Talking Heads as well, which I think is fantastic on iPlayer as well. But also the amount that's being produced by local companies and organisations, and also amateur organisations and just people from home giving theatre a go and seeing what online content they can upload. There's been a fantastic response across the country. So yeah, definitely agree with that. We've all just had to get our heads around online in this online world.
Yeah, totally. I mean, you know, nothing's ever going to beat the connection of being together. I'm not one of those people that is going to be transformed by this, saying, oh well, you know, this is the way forward. But certainly some of the elements we should probably retain. But that's my doorbell going. But I'm just going to ignore it and see if it goes away. It's not going away.
This always happens. This is live, everyone.
I know. Okay, right. Let me make it stop. Sorry, everybody.
Okay. No
worries. My 4-year-old.
While we're just waiting for Sophia to come back, I will just say that if you haven't already, check out our industry talk with filmmaker Mia Bays as well. That was released last week, so that's already on YouTube. And coming up next week, we've got a talk with Anil Gupta, and following that with Jack Price, who lives in Bruton. Hello again.
Sorry about that, everybody.
That's all right, no problem. Where were we? I think let's move on to our next question. And that is, do you think the nature of media and filmmaking will change post-COVID?
Yeah, I mean, it has to, doesn't it? Yeah. I mean, like I was saying, I think, I suppose I was starting to say that before, is that, you know, a lot of the processes will probably have to morph into a more streamlined version of how they've been running, possibly in post-production. I don't know how it could in production. I mean, I know some friends of mine have gone into production, and they're obviously having to, you know, keep social distance whilst they're filming, and then you've got the bubbles. I don't know how that's going to impact, you know, the actual teams, the crews and the actors. If they're all having to live together, that's going to be pretty intense, isn't it? Maybe we'll get these like really crazy stories of these incubated people.
Yeah, that's possibly what's going to come out of it.
Yeah.
Has it affected the way in which you work, or anything that you were currently working on?
I think the biggest way that I've suffered personally is I'm a great believer in journeys as a kind of thinking time, and I've really missed getting on public transport, going to places, walking to places, meeting people. Filmmaking is so collaborative, and to not have that sort of face-to-face collaboration, walking together, being able to meet in a room and just look at the white of somebody's eyes, is has been a really big challenge. So yeah, I've definitely been affected by that, but that's more of the kind of emotional stuff. I'd say the practicalities are that it is hard, you don't have a lot of people, especially as an independent filmmaker, you don't have a lot of people to work with. Yeah. But certainly some of the students I've been teaching over lockdown, some of the BA students, it's been the best work that I've ever seen, in 3 or 4 years. Yeah, it's been really creative. I think they've been really pushed to the limits, and that has generated some incredible work from people 20, 21 years old, that I've been really proud of. So I like to remain hopeful. I think it's important to remain hopeful that we can't see this as something being taken away from us, but rather something that we're being presented with, that we could look at how the shape of it could help us.
Yeah, absolutely. That's, a really good advice, and be really interesting to hear, because I think a lot of people will be able to relate to that emotional side and wanting to see someone face to face and collaborate over ideas, because knocking back and forth and things like that. So yeah. Definitely. Yeah. Anyway, let's talk about Lost in Vagueness, which you directed and produced. That was shot in Glastonbury over 12 years.
It was.
Yeah, which is a crazy long time. And let's talk about first what the difficulties you experienced shooting the film over that period and in Somerset, and how you overcame them.
I suspect, when I think back on it, and people often ask that question, when I started filming in 2004, I didn't, clearly you don't think you're going to enter a 12-year project when you're in your 20s. It's just not that common, isn't it? So I thought I was just going to film for a few weeks, and then later I was like, okay, maybe it's a few months. And when I started, I was a completely, free, hedonistic person in my 20s. I didn't have very many responsibilities, so I could take those risks. And now I'm a mother of 2, so it's a slightly different experience. So when I came back to material that I'd shot in that time, it felt really, really different. But I suppose, thinking about challenges then and now, one of the challenges was when we were filming in 2007, and we had 5 cameras. Imagine if, for those of you who, I'm sure there's many, have been to Glastonbury in the rain, when you're sort of standing there knee deep in mud, and I think I cried when our wellies got filled with water. I was just traumatized by that, because I was like, how are we going to get around? But yeah, filming in those conditions was pretty difficult, to charge batteries and keep lenses clean and stop camera people wandering off and not seeing them for 2 days. And, it's quite challenging environment to film in, because there's so many temptations for people. But, match that with sort of cut to 10 years later, when I was halfway through a Kickstarter campaign raising money for the edit, about to give birth, pacing a labour ward. I'll take the first one. Because 10 years on, it was kind of like, oh my God, and you feel like there's a lot more at stake. So there's a real benefit to going into these things quite young and just going for it. But I've loved working in Somerset and Glastonbury. I think it's such a special place, and Glastonbury is just full of characters and people who are at the you know, the top of their game, really, aren't they? And they're just creating worlds for the experience and pleasure of hundreds of thousands of people, and that is inspiring to be around. So how can you not love it, really?
Really good to hear,
Yeah.
because anyone who's been to Glastonbury has all been there soaked, wellies like trampled, and trudging around by a ton of mud. That's what you feel like. So I can't imagine actually having to then drag around a camera on top of that. So yeah, that's definitely something worth thinking about. And what were your experiences of like creating the film over 12 years? Like, did you find, how did the story progress in that sense?
Well, when I first started, it was the turn of the millennium, actually, wasn't it? So I had come out of the sort of rave era as a teenager and young person, and that was a very sort of aesthetically quite bland place. And then along came Las Vegas, and it was a complete explosion of visual creativity, and that was incredibly exciting. So I thought it was going to be about women and how women were expressing this new found kind of on stage conversation they were having with audiences that felt very fresh and new. But as time went on, it became very clear that the central character was Roy Gervitz, one of the originators of Las Vegas, and his story and how it fitted into the overarching bigger picture were by far the kind of the most important story to tell. So, I mean, I think coming to the material that was pretty old by the time I came to it. So we had 5 or 6 different formats, I think, you know, starting right at 8mm family footage, and then I put a big call out to anyone who'd ever been to Las Vegas to send me material. So people were sending me, you know, stuff shot on very, very early camera phones and you know, very compromised sound, etc. So I had over 400 hours of material,
wow,
which I do not advise anyone to do because it took us 6 months to edit it. So yeah, so it was clear that it was going to be his story and the story of how, you know, kind of pandemonium is monetized, really, and how that repeats that cycle in society, how we take something good and we just can't resist to exploit it till it's no longer good anymore. But yeah, I mean, you know, it was an amazing process, and I loved it and still have a great relationship with all those people. I think it's really important to have that integrity to your filmmaking, to keep good relationships with people, and, you know, perhaps work with people that you like working with.
Yeah. And you were saying, like, despite the fact that you live in London, you often visit Somerset and Glastonbury still, and still keep in contact with those people that, you know, became part of the film, which I think is lovely.
Massively. They're a really big part of my life. And, you know, I'm inspired by the work that they continue to do in Shangri-La, and the work that has been produced and has inspired subsequent, you know, generations of work since then. So I think, you know, it's really important to me. It's an important kind of place that I need to go to. I wish I could live in Somerset.
We'll have you. So we'll move on now to my final question before we move on to the audience quickfire questions. And that is, what advice would you give to a young person or an adult, anybody, looking to make it in the film industry?
I'm curious to know what other people have said when you've when you've asked this question. I mean, you know, again, what I always say to students, there's kind of three things really. Is doesn't matter what age you're at. I think having a mentor of some kind, whether formal or informal, is a really powerful thing. And there's so many kind of schemes and possibilities now that really weren't around 20 or so years ago. But, you know, even if there's someone that you really admire, can you write to them and say, you know, can we have a coffee? And is there someone that they could nominate that could mentor you for 6 months or so? Because that's a huge, that's not just beneficial for you, but it can be a really enriching exchange for both of you. So I always say, if you can find someone to kind of guide you and be a sounding board, that's really amazing experience. I mean, I was lucky enough to be chosen for the Women in Film in TV mentoring scheme. So I would tell all the women out there to apply for that, because that's very much still going, and it's a brilliant scheme. And you know, you meet so many amazing women in the industry. And then the other two really silly and basic things, but really important, are don't be late and be nice. You know, it really kind of easy, but quite easy to get wrong apparently as well. You know, and don't be late means be half an hour early, and be nice means be willing, and kind of, you know, you've got to, I remember so well when I started to be a runner. I wrote hundreds of physical letters, because that's how old I am, in the days before email. So I just wrote actual paper letters to people with stamps on. And I wrote hundreds of those, and then rang people up. And you know, don't be afraid to use the phone. I do find there's a big phone adversity in younger people, but production is still based on the phone. You still have to have those conversations with people in real time. So that's quite a lot of things there, isn't there?
Yeah, definitely. I think that covers it. And like you say, with the phoning people, if you then have a greater connection with that person, then like when you meet them face to face, but if that's not possible, you know, a phone call, you have a greater connection than you would via email, because they've heard your voice, and they, you know, you immediately become more personal and relatable to. So yeah, that is very good advice.
Well, it's a trend that I've noticed, having taught for a few years on BA, you know, courses. I've noticed that a lot of, you know, 20-somethings do not like making phone calls. So sometimes I just hold their hand and say, you know, come on, let's dial the number together, and then I'm going to stand there whilst you make the call. So I just think it's about making it fun, and not making it feel like everything rests on that one phone call, because it doesn't, because there's another 100 phone calls after that to make. So yeah.
Okay, fantastic. All right, so we'll move on to our quickfire questions now. So if you've got any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat, and I will put them to Sophia. So firstly, one that we've had submitted by email is, what are you working on at the moment?
So I've been working on something that is, well, I mean, when COVID first started, I was halfway through 2 scripts that I suddenly, you know, was pulling my hair out going, oh God, I'd never be able to make these now. But I think that attitude's changed now. So there's a couple of scripts that are being developed, which I can't really talk about. And then I'm a mother of 2 boys, and have been very interested in gender, especially in the industry. So I'm actually making a documentary with them, because I'm clearly a sucker for punishment. You know what they say about children and animals. So yeah, I'm kind of looking at gender, bringing up boys, raising boys, and making a documentary with them together, which is challenging with a 4-year-old and a 9-year-old.
I can imagine.
But at least I've got access to them, and I don't have to wait for actors, you know.
Another question submitted by Greg is, which is your favourite Peep Show episode?
Oh, blimey. I don't really remember their names, but I remember, I mean, they were so much fun to work with, David Mitchell and Robert Webb, and obviously very clever people, and there were a lot of strong characters on set. But I do remember with Olivia Cole, who's now a superstar, but definitely wasn't then, but seems to have retained all her kind of, what's that word? Dignity? No. Oh, I can't remember. Anyway, there was a scene where we were all inside like a hall, and they had to dance, and I think David's character had to do like really dodgy dancing with Olivia, and that was really, really funny to shoot, and it was really funny to see all the extras being really awful dancers, and the music was horrible, and the hall was really like, yeah, really cringy.
Fantastic. So then another question, and this one was submitted by Chris, is what was it like working for Richard Iodi? And forgive me if I'm pronouncing that incorrectly.
On IT Crowd, yeah, he's a really, again, it's the great thing about British comedy is you get so much talent in it, and as an assistant director, you do get to chat and hang out in those ways. So it was really, really, they were all such lovely people. But of course, because we're talking, sort of 15 years ago, a lot of their careers weren't as established as they are now. So I think there was a lot of freedom and a big sense of play, a huge sense of play. But I remember Richard as being a very kind and nice person. Hi, if you're out there. I doubt he'll remember shooting that all those years ago.
Yeah, I suppose it was a long time ago, actually. So then, who is the funniest cast member off screen on the IT Crowd?
Well, that's a bit political, isn't it? I'm not sure that I should go into that place. I mean, I can remember funny things that happened to us. We certainly had a lot of fun. Again, Graham Linehan is such a TV talent, isn't he? The creator of Father Ted, as well as other comedy. He's pretty relentless writer, so he's pretty funny. But funnily enough, you're always, in those kind of shows, the cast gives so much in front of the camera that off camera they tend to try and harness that energy. I mean, I remember at the time of shooting IT Crowd, I barely had any time to watch TV. So I hadn't seen The Mighty Boosh. I didn't know who Noel Fielding was, even though we were working together. And, he was such a great, and now is like a complete hero. And I think back to it now, I was like, how did I not know who he was? For God's sakes. But yeah, a lot of the crew always keep the energy up. And actually, as an assistant director, you are responsible for keeping people laughing, because you're all there at 5 a.m. till 9 p.m. You've got to have that energy.
Yeah, motivational spirit, as they say.
Definitely.
And what was the first production that you worked on, if you remember?
Do you know, I do actually. I was a runner with a friend of mine, and it was a BBC thing called The Secret, with 2 quite famous actors in whose names I can't remember. But yes, that was, and I spent the whole, I think I was on it 5 or 6 weeks, spent the whole 5 or 6 weeks in utter belief that I was going to be fired at any second, because it's such a sort of intense environment that you think everyone's talking about you, and clearly they're not. But when you're bottom of the rung, you don't know where you belong. So it's always hard to find that place in a pack. But it's a good experience.
Yeah, like you say, intense, but no doubt it set you up in your career, no doubt.
Yeah.
So final question, who would you most like to work with?
Oh my Lord, there's so many people. I don't know if I can answer that. There was just so many brilliant people, and my mind has been melted by sunshine. Who would you like to work with, Catherine?
I would love to work with someone like Dawn French. I think she's got quite a nice personality off screen and is hilarious on screen as well, especially if we're talking about comedy.
Yeah.
I think she's quite a leading lady that I would like to work with.
Yeah, she is Yeah, have I worked with her? I think I might have, actually. I can't remember. This is a problem. But yeah, I mean, all the comedy lot are great, but also I quite like kind of dark and moody people. Not moody in a bad way, but I would like to work. There's a lot. I mean, I'd love to work with Shonda Rhimes, you know, all the kind of strong female showrunners in the States. And another woman that I'm currently completely thinking is amazing is Pamela Adlon, who controversially worked with Louis C.K. a lot, but then went off and did her own series called Better Things, which again is on iPlayer. It's amazing. So these are the kind of people that, yeah, I probably more sort of big drama series stuff.
Oh, yeah. Amazing. Well, thank you very much for talking to us, Sophia, and thank you everyone for watching at home. We hope you've been inspired, and if you have got any questions, like I say, please just ask. So you can watch Lost in Vagueness on Amazon Prime and iTunes as well, I believe. Peep Show, The IT Crowd, and I think Primeval as well in some places, is also available to watch on Netflix, Amazon Prime, or on all four. And all the links and references from today's interview are in the description below. So just check that out. But yeah, thank you very much, Sophia. And I hope you've enjoyed chatting to me as much as I've enjoyed chatting to you. Been very interesting, definitely.
Very much.
All right.
Yeah. Great. All right. Thanks for having me. And, you know, hope everyone's surviving in the heat wave.
Yeah. It's very hot here. Anyway, yeah. Thank you very much, everyone. And hopefully you'll join in again with us next week when we interview Anil Gupta.
Great.